I had this bouquet of tulips, and apparently this one, when it bloomed, became so beautiful. I turned it over a bit. It's quite complicated by the drawing, so I'll offer you a grid pattern right away. The resist is a dark gray that I got by mixing clear and black, and it may appear black now, but it will get lighter once it dries. I mentioned this a while ago, but maybe you haven't seen this video, so I'll say it again. Here I started to outline the petal, and without taking my hand off, I led it to the end. And this petal turned out to be nice and neat, and this one I first traced this way, and now I'm tracing it the other way. And now here's a minor but drop. When the resist is more fluid, these drops turn out to be more showy and often spoil the impression of the whole picture. And that's why it's better to do all the lines without taking your hand off, without breaking the line. Drops are still formed at the tip of the nozzle. It's better to remove them with a paper towel. And the longer the tip is, the easier to draw a neat line of resist. I forgot to show my frame. And here's a place for the future project. I talked about frames and how I usually stretch silk in this video, but lately I've grown to love using these rubber band hooks. I was once asked for a link to them, but if you know the name of the product, you can easily find them. But now I'm going to dilute the powder dye for today's tulip. To keep the powder particles off the table, I put a paper towel underneath. Let's say you have a powder dye like that, but I'm going to use dye from my old stockpile. My dyes were bought many years ago from a textile factory and they never spoil, so they practically last forever. In fact, they only have one drawback. They need to be steamed to set. Other than that, they are perfect. By this link you can see more detailed information. Your powder dye will probably have instructions on it as how much water to dilute it in. I always make a concentrated solution, and afterwards I can dilute it with water as many times as needed, as I want. But at the same time I have the option to paint with a dense bright color, and otherwise the instructions are best followed. You may need to add vinegar to your dye or something else, and please don't be surprised about the color. I wanted to paint this tulip with one single color, and that's it. Yes, the tulip will be monochromatic. Usually these powders dissolve very well in water, but it's advisable to check well before painting silk. You see, these little grains are not dissolved yet, and you could close the jar with the dye with a lid and shake it well. So what else do I love these dyes for? Even if I have them dried up, I just add hot water to them and I can keep working again. Exactly, this dye has nothing to do with today's project. I just wanted to show you how it works. I like brushes that are resilient, especially if you want to blend dyes on silk. An elastic brush is more comfortable to do that. By the way, I told you about the undissolved grains on my palette. I left the dye on the palette and I didn't rinse it off. It's dry, but it's okay. And this amount of dye will be enough for the whole tulip. So I start painting the tulip from the lightest parts. I practically paint them with water for now. I literally add a little bit of color to the water. My task today is to figure out the ratio of dark and light spots and to find the right tone in between. So first I'll find the lightest spots. then I'll gradually build up the saturation and therefore the darkness. And you see, the elasticity of the brush helps me to rub the dye. Sometimes it's possible to remove excess color with porous paper, but not always. Anyway, you can try. And here, of course, it's important to be attentive, and it's desirable not to rush to increase the saturation of color. When the lightest areas are outlined, I can move on to the darker ones. In this group of petals, tonal gradations are barely visible, and I will give them the basic tone, and then I will paint the fine gradations inside them. Or maybe I won't. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. And you can see how convenient it is to have saturated dye and to create on a palette as many shades as you want, as you need. Although perhaps for a beginning artist it might be more convenient to mix just 3 tones: light, medium and dark, and perhaps it would be much easier and it would have helped to not get confused with all those tones and details. Unfortunately, this idea has just now crossed my mind, but I'll think about it and maybe make a video like this. And by the way, if you'd like such a simplified version, give me a sign in the comments. Here at this point the highlights and middle areas are already mostly visible, and now all that's left is to add the dark ones. My dear viewers, your actions help the channel to develop. I thank everyone who leaves likes, writes comments and so on. You are great. Thank you. If the petals are dry, you can wet them with water again. And at the very end you can add detail with a semi-dry brush. And this is what the flower looks like when it's dry. I don't know what the background it would be look better against, and tell me please which you like the best. I wish you good luck painting this unusual tulip. Enjoy the process and I'll see you in the next videos.